Sit back and enjoy this wonderful episode with Keith Bertschin, the former Birmingham City player. Your host is the Gabbie Cabbie. SRBMedia.
Brave, bold, stupid, or you did what you had to do because you were the archetypal central striker back in the day. You put your head where angels feared to tread.
I think a little bit of all of those things you mentioned, mate, really.
Yeah.
I think if you had long enough to think about what you did, you probably wouldn't do it.
Yes.
So for me, when the opportunity arose, I thought I didn't really think about anything but thinking, well, I've got to try and seize on this opportunity. And we had good crossers of the ball, whether they be fullbacks or wide players. So I got ample chance to launch myself from time to time. And fortunately, although it was a little bit touch and go, come out unscathed.
What made you play in that kind of way? Is it something that you've seen in players? Was it something that was inherently in you? What brought that out? Because I think you've just answered the question. You just did what you had to do as a central striker back in those days of the 70s.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult question, really. Yeah. For heading the ball particularly, quite nicely. I'm not a big one for having photographs up everywhere, but I got a couple of diving headers for Birmingham, which gave me a lot of pleasure, really. But I go back, and I was about 13 or 14 at school, and I'm heading a ball exactly the same way. I'm sort of almost vertical, and if that's the right word. And you're only 12 or 13, so it was something perhaps my dad had put in me. I mean, he was a decent player, and he taught me all the sort of structural things, how to head it, how to kick it, and perhaps it was left over from there, but it served me okay. And it was great to actually take it on when you're an adult, and actually do it sort of later in life in the Football League.
We are going to take a trip down memory lane, Keith, because that's what the show is all about. We revisit those halcyon days of the golden age of the 70s. But you do remind me so much of Andy Gray in the way that you put your head there. And I remember a goal that you scored against Notts County on promotion day that we drawed 3-3, and it took us back to the promised land. And Andy was very much like that. I do a regular podcast with Terry Curran, and TC says the way Andy used to go, it was just incredible watching that guy ply his trade.
Paul, it's funny you mention him, because he became a very, very good friend of mine. And even while I was at Birmingham, I used to go over to him quite a lot, and we actually went on holiday together. I think it's just about all right to say that now.
Of course it is.
If you'd have said it back in the day, I'd have been lynched. But I remember playing for Ipswich, and we played Villa, and I think he got a hat trick. They won 5 or 6-1. And I thought to myself, wow, this fella, he means it. And I think you can nick stuff off other players as long as you can carry it out. But that after coming off the pitch, I'm thinking, I've got to be a little bit more like him. And in that particular area anyway, and the aggression and the way he attacked the ball, was something to behold. And I'm not saying I ever got to his level, but it gave me another idea to just make sure that when you went for it properly. And you do learn off other players, and that was probably one of the learning curves for me on that day.
You touched upon you were friends with Andy. There's obviously always been a big rivalry between Birmingham City and Aston Villa. We're going to go into those Birmingham years a little bit later in the podcast. But I always used to say to my boys, you're friends before the game and your friends after. And football is all about making friends. And I think it's sad that when you respect players of other teams, fans don't appreciate that, or it doesn't sit right with them, because I just feel there's too much hatred in the game, and I think that we all love the game of football, and I think we should just be a bit more respectful of the game and players.
Yeah, well, listen, you don't make a great big spectacle out of it. I mean, we was fairly careful when we were together.
Yeah.
I do remember though that particular game at Villa Park, my first game at Villa Park, and I kind of had not poo-pooed it, but thought, well, Midlands derby. I hadn't really heard of a Midlands derby. I hadn't been in Birmingham that long, and I remember going down to sort of see what the pitch was like, and it was about 500 fans on the pitch fighting. I thought, Christ, they take this a little bit more seriously than I might have thought, and all the other players were laughing when I came back into the dressing room saying, oh, see what's going on out there. And of course, it was a little bit similar when we were playing, there wasn't a great deal of football played. I think he was injured that day. He might have been sub and came on and created havoc for whatever length of time he come on for. But fortunately, I scored on that day. Trevor whizzed the ball in and managed to get on the end of it. And you don't realise until afterwards, that what you've done, and then you realise the sort of the real rivalry between the two teams. And I think I got a sort of a first-hand impression of that after that game, and there was a lot of rivalry, and I was never going to take it lightly again.
I don't think people outside the area quite understand the rivalry of Birmingham City and Aston Villa. We are going to wander back in time and go back to your earlier years in a bit, but that rivalry, you've played it for both of the East Anglian teams in Norwich and Ipswich. How does it differ from the rivalry there in East Anglia? Or you grew up in London. Was you an Arsenal fan? Because you started your career at Arsenal.
I was an Arsenal fan, and funny things happen in football. Obviously it was the days of Charlie George and Radford and Ray Kennedy and Peter Storey and terrific players. Charlie George I actually ended up bumping into later in life, but no, they were my team, and I was fortunate, to be fair. I was a real Arsenal fan because all my family was from that area. Yeah. My mum and dad were born that way, almost in Avenel Road. They lived in Avenel Road, which was the road that was by Highbury. And so we always used to go there, and I couldn't believe we had to get there at sort of 1 o'clock for a 3 o'clock kickoff. Yeah. And sometimes even when I'd played in London for Ipswich youth team, we'd then go to Arsenal or Tottenham because it was just what we did, and so yeah, I have fond memories of Arsenal, and it was just the greatest day of the week, going there. And as I say, to actually think one day you might play there was, something that I never ever dreamt of, really.
How did them derbies differ? Because the North London has always been a little bit of a needle, the Norwich and Ipswich, a little bit of a distance between the two. And certainly Birmingham City, families are divided in this area.
Sure. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. I mean, I think, the London, certainly Tottenham and Arsenal, was, it was serious, as I'm sure Liverpool, Everton, Man United, Man City, but certainly if I never have put Birmingham Villa up there after playing in a game, I definitely would. And and also then, in later life, I was coaching, and we had a number of teams under Steve where we went to Villa Park, and it was almost as chaotic as when we were playing. So no, it's right up there with any derby, I have to say. And what tends to happen is, because there's so much on it, sometimes it's not the best football game, but I think the supporters and the players are only really concerned with the result.
Absolutely. Now, you started your professional life at Arsenal. Was you not told by the doctor that you'd never play again? You had a problem with your knee, didn't you, or your leg?
Yeah,
bone?
I mean, at the time, I wasn't sure whether it was real, or, I mean, I had the knee problem, but I wasn't sure if it was just a polite way of letting me go, because I was a lot smaller in those days. And when I was 12 or 13, there was young players like Glenn Roeder, Laurie Cunningham, these youngsters. Yeah. And my mother had passed me on some memorabilia, and she'd found a trial game team sheet, when I was a 12 or 13 at London Coney, and Liam Brady, O'Leary, Stapleton, all sort of 12 or 13-year-old
Yeah.
were coming over from Ireland even in them days. So, there was a good ruck of players, and obviously some went to different clubs and had their careers, and some got through, like the Irish lads, and the backbone of Arsenal's team. So it was very, very competitive, but it was kind of from school to your county team, and then if you could push on, it would be the professional league. And so Arsenal will always have a special place in my heart, as well as I was very friendly with Steve Bold when I played at Stoke, and obviously he had a great career. Him and Lee Dixon were at Stoke when I was there, and they went on and done famously well. And I still speak to Steve on a regular basis now, and it's just nice that he done so well at a club that I had an awful lot of time for.
And influenced by Alan Hudson as well, because I think O'Doherty was the broker of that deal that took Steve
Yeah,
Bold
quite
to
well.
Arsenal.
You know what he's like, and I'm sure all the people that listen to your show, who've heard Alan, he was one of my heroes, really. Unfortunately, I got to play with him, and he became a bigger hero.
Yeah.
And this was kind of in the sort of I don't know, the evergreen, if you like, time of his career, and he was getting little niggles. But he was still such a fantastic player and such a fantastic influence. And he was just a great senior player that, if anything, might have disappeared in the current game. But these senior players that you always find in the teams that you transfer to, they were everything. They were like the psychologists, they were the sports scientists, they would pick you up when you were down, they'd do everything for you. I mean, there's different people earning their money at this particular job now, sort of doing those type things, whereas in our day, senior players done it for you, and he was one of them, and obviously particularly fond of him as well.
But you left Arsenal, you became quite a nemesis of Arsenal. Did you not go to Barnet? Was that your next port of call?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I can't remember that far back, but I'm sure I was disappointed, and I got a polite letter saying, you've had a knee problem, and unfortunately we couldn't take you on. And Bertie Mee was the manager at the time, and so I didn't have any problems anymore, and I did have to rest, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I was playing normal men's football. I was 15, and the manager said, "Look, I want you to go to my friend's team," and it was Barnet. And I had a bit of training there, and I had a run out in a couple of practice games, and the manager said, "I'm going to play you in the first game." And two things happened after not thinking I was going to be a player and thinking I got to stay on at school, which I did. I managed to get a hat-trick in 15 minutes for Barnet in the first game of the season, and a chap called Cyril Lee, who was Bobby Robson's first team coach, he was dropping his wife off at a friend of hers, and he'd come to watch the game. And on the Sunday, I'd had the chief scout round, and I went and had a week's trial with Ipswich before I was due to go into a college in London. And I decided to go with the football, and fortunately, it worked out for me, and obviously it all really started then when I got, my first contract proper, and that's where Ipswich came in, and I'll always be thankful to Barnet, and more importantly, Cyril Lee being there, which gave me the opportunity, and Bobby Robson taking the chance with me. So, had a bit of good fortune, but sometimes you have to earn it. And so there you go. After having having a sort of a young career of being at Arsenal, I then went to I went to QPR for a little while, and I went to Watford, and it didn't work out. And so I enjoyed football. I was never going to stop playing football. I loved it. And I loved playing with all the older fellas as well, and we had a laugh, and I was still only a youngster. And then all of a sudden the real stuff happened, and that was a real wake-up call to realise that, goodness me, these were really good players, So, and that's when Ipswich came on the scene, and Bobby Robson too.
I do want to indulge in Ipswich because I think they're one of the great football teams of the 70s. Bobby had such a great group of players and enhanced them, and they come within a whisker of winning the championship. Sadly, not nowhere near the team today that what they were of yesteryear. But who was
No.
your first hero growing up, Keith? As a kid, what players did you look up to?
Well, I mean, as I say, Arsenal and Tottenham were my first two
Yeah.
teams, and I particularly remember, Charlie George. We went to, I think it was 1970 or 71, where they beat Liverpool at Wembley,
Yeah.
and he scored a wonderful goal.
Yeah.
I think, as a kid, I think he was one of the first ones. I also, when I was at QPR, one of the chaps there gave me a couple of tickets to go and watch a game, and I had the pleasure to watch Rodney Marsh score a hat-trick for QPR, and I thought, I want to be Rodney Marsh now, so I still was about 13 or 14. And also, obviously, when I went to Ipswich, I just couldn't believe the standard. I thought I was all right, I went there, and the standard from the youth team to the reserves to the first team, to be fair, they were all top of their own divisions. But it was, heroes, I suppose. And I also loved, of course, Jimmy Greaves. Because when Arsenal were away, we'd sometimes go to Tottenham. And, I got the opportunity to watch the likes of, Jimmy Greaves, Dave Mackay, and then later Pat Jennings, of course, who was one of my heroes. And, I was brought up in, great company with Tottenham and Arsenal. And very occasionally we'd go to West Ham, because obviously, I wanted to see Jeff Hurst and Martin Peters and Bobby Moore. So I was spoiled for the football that I saw, but thoroughly enjoyed it, of course.
What was your favourite football ground of the 70s?
That's a good one. That is a good one. Well, Ipswich was a fantastic playing surface, I've got to be honest. But I have to say, if I was really honest, the 70s, my first season at Birmingham, seeing it full, I mean, I don't know how many they got, but 40,000, I suppose. I don't know.
We would
but
have been
seeing that full every single week, and they didn't have any seats on that far side. It was all they was all bunched in as tight as they could get. That was fab. I really used to like playing at Birmingham. I loved it. I mean, Everton, and I suppose because in that first season we actually beat Liverpool. And I think we beat Man United as well, away at their ground. I think Liverpool was a particularly special ground as well, because with all the history and the sort of team they were at the time, it was special playing there, and obviously even better to score there and win.
Ipswich Town, let's indulge at Ipswich and your time there at Ipswich. The front players that you had amongst you were a young Alan Brazil and Eric Gates. Paul Mariner come on the scene. You got Trevor Wymark. I thought Trevor Wymark was an absolutely fantastic football player, both in the air and with his feet, and had quite a languid style and a style of his own.
And also, of course, that current England centre forward at the time was David Johnson as well. So there was 5 or 6, even 7 at some stage, because Clive Woods could play wide, but he could also play through the middle, and they were all terrific players. And obviously Wymark, I really liked. He was very, very low key and didn't say too much, and he was a wonderful footballer. He was particularly good in the air, which used to sometimes annoy him because he only ever got talked about of his aerial ability. He was actually a wonderful technician as well. He got the ball down, and his touch was fantastic, and he could move, as could David Johnson. David Johnson was particularly quick and got over the top all the time. They were super players. And again, as I said before, they were only too willing to help you. As when David Johnson left and Paul Mariner arrived, there was a little bit of a leeway, but Mariner arrived, and he was exactly the same as the rest of them. They were only too pleased to help us younger players. And, as I said at the beginning, they were, they were your sort of mentor really, and they would look after you, and they would try and keep you right up to the point when I decided to take my chances at Birmingham. 2 or 3 of the senior players, Mick Mills and Mariner particularly, sort of came and sort of said, look, it's going to be a great opportunity for you. You're going to go and play with Trevor Francis, and it's a big club. They get well supported. Stick your chest out and give it your best go, and better advice I couldn't have had. They were great, that learning curve at Ipswich with the standard of play. I mean, the whole team were internationals. Yeah. So you were playing with the very, very best. And, they let you know it if you weren't bang on it. So to get to their standard, you think it's impossible when you start. But slowly, you get a little bit closer to them. And it enables you to at least be able to sort of hold your own in that division.
And as a central striker or any forward, inside forward, you need that service, and Ipswich had players all over the pitch that provided you with great service. It was almost like total football, wasn't it? They were a great football team, and no one better than Kevin Beattie. What a player he was. Yeah,
it was a shame for Kevin, because he was another one who was great with the younger players and brought them in and encouraged them. And he was just almost like a football freak. I think Robson had a soft spot for him, but I don't agree with sort of saying someone natural, because you get the idea of football, then you really work hard, and then someone calls you natural. That's better, because you got to start somewhere. But he was quite incredible, for about, I think he was nearly as wide as he was tall, but he was about 5'10", 5'11" tops. He could jump and spring, over houses. And he could kick it, he could kick it from Ipswich to Norwich. Yeah. It was quite incredible what he was like. He was just all muscle and strength, without appearing to do a great deal of strength and conditioning work. He was just built like it. And he was fearless. He didn't seem to have nerves. He just absolutely enjoyed going and playing football. And, his career was really cut short when he tried to get back, I think, from a cartilage operation. I think he might have only been 23, 24. Yeah. But he'd been in the side since, I would imagine, 16, 17-year-old, because he was a regular, player for Ipswich when I was there. He played every week with Alan Hunter. And arguably, probably the most natural footballer I've ever seen. I've played with 1 or 2 good players, and obviously Trevor fits in there as well as a striker. But Beattie, quick, aggressive, great left foot, and played the game in a great way. And for the years that I was with him, thoroughly enjoyed his company and thoroughly enjoyed watching him play, and then eventually playing with him.
And as fast as, and not just over a short distance, but I think he only narrowly got beat by Malcolm McDonald in the Superstars, didn't he? But he had a little bit of a problem there, didn't he, old Kev?
Well, if I just say that I don't think he wore a jockstrap. After about 60 yards, he had to reconnect himself, and that's where he got done on the line. But he was kind of, I would suggest he might have been sort of 10, 11 seconds over 100 yards. He was scary. I mean, he couldn't run much further than 105 yards. He'd be blowing for fun, but up to 100 yards, which is more than enough on a football pitch, he was the quickest thing. I think I saw it might have been Bob Latchford that might have turned him on the halfway line once when I was watching, and he must have been 30 yards away from him, and somehow Beattie had fallen down, and he got up and tore after him and got back to him by the edge of the box. I thought, wow, I've just seen something here with this player. And he was a super player, and it was a super team, to be absolutely honest.
And your first goal, unbelievably, against the team that said you weren't going to make it or let you go. How did that feel? Because it was pretty much your first touch of the ball, wasn't it, for Ipswich when you scored against Arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if my career had finished when I played in the reserves and scored twice against them, I think we drew 2-2, I think I'd have been quite happy.
Yes.
But, to then, ironies in football are quite amazing sometimes. And Bertie Mee, who'd let me go, it was his farewell game. And I remember thinking the night before, well, I probably won't get on if they're winning, but at least I might get a little bit of a bonus, But I thought to myself, well, the ideal situation would be to get on losing and end up winning. So Robson sort of said that I was going with him, which was a surprise. And so, okay. And I asked my pal where the first team were playing. He said Arsenal, and I couldn't believe it. I don't think I slept that night. And I remember with about, 15 minutes to go, something like that, Robson's gone and said to me, go and get warmed up. And I absolutely was like a bag of nerves. And Colin Viljoen wasn't playing. He had been injured, but he was sitting on the bench. And he said, go and get warmed up. And all I was thinking was, well, who the bloody hell are they going to take off? Because they are all so good. And as it turned out, David Johnson came off. And within 25 seconds, I think I'd gone down the wing, got fouled, went into the box. Trevor Weimark wrestled with one of their defenders. I just got in front of mine and I'd scored. And I think I'd been on 20 or 30 seconds, So, and better than that, that was the equaliser because we were one down. And my friend Pat Sharkey scored sort of almost in injury time, so we'd won the game. And you sort of say, how did you feel? And you almost go numb, really. It was just kind of one of these things that you don't ever think could happen. And even after the game, you don't think it's happened. And obviously my family had grown up around Arsenal. A lot of them had been commissionaires who, showed people to their seats.
Yeah.
So it was really, really exciting. And then I thought, well, if I never kick another football, I'll die a happy man, And obviously it went on from there and other things happened even back at Highbury. But for that moment, I think it was as good as it probably got, really.
But then it got better when you travelled back to North London with Birmingham City and you scored arguably the greatest goal of your career at Highbury again, didn't you?
Yeah. With all the sort of paraphernalia where it was, and my father actually was sitting next to Alan Hudson as it happened, and Trevor had done something quite brilliant around the edge of his own box and gone past two or three players and seen me. I make a run on the halfway line in behind some of their defenders. He hits a great ball and I've sent wide a little bit and I've had to confront one or two players and I've cut inside and smash one with my left foot. Really, I mean, what can you say? You aim at the goal, but you don't expect it to go off the underside of the crossbar at the far post and go in, especially against Pat Jennings. And I've done well, really, to conceal my surprise. But it was one of those moments that you never forget. And, you can play all your life and never have anything like that. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate. And it was a goal that, yeah, you're right, I'd treasure. And to score against Pat Jennings, I think, was the best thing of all, because obviously, as a younger lad, he'd been one of my heroes, seeing him both at Arsenal and Tottenham.
SRBMedia.
Who was your most difficult opponent in those days, Keith?
Well, early days, I remember coming on at Liverpool, funny enough, for Ipswich. And there was a particular fearsome figure called Tommy Smith. And I do remember the manager said, go and make a difference. And I remember the ball coming up to me and I've just put my arms out as normal and I've heard this great big clonk, like, my elbow hitting someone's nose. I look round, I'm thinking, anybody but that Tommy Smith, because he looks mad. And it was Tommy Smith. And his nose was split in half. And I thought, oh no. I said, please. I was thinking to myself, please go off. Anyway, spitting through all the blood, he's looked at me. He's gone, I'm going to break your back. And the referee was between me and Tommy Smith. And I said to the ref, I said, you can't say that was an accident, ref. It might have been an accident, son, but I'd go and play on the wing. that was a ref. And by the way, I did. And it was marvellous, really, because sometime later, we got Liverpool the first game of the season for Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I think we'd been playing 30 seconds. The ball came up to me. I was just about to get it under control, hopefully. And I ended up going up and up and up and up and up and came down in a great big heap. And there was this Tommy Smith's face looking over me, saying to me, you didn't think I'd forget you, did you, son? And I said, it doesn't look like it, does it? and pulled me up, and away we go. I'm thinking this is going to be a long afternoon, you know. So yeah, he was the fearsome one, and similar when again at Ipswich, because you're only young, you know, and you're wiry, and you haven't sort of even fully developed then. I went into a challenge with Gordon McQueen. He was playing for Leeds at the time, and again, I've gone in really, really hard. But I've just kind of gone up and up and up and come down in a big heap. And he said, "Welcome to the First Division, son," and just ran off. And he was a very good friend of Steve Bruce's, and I met him on many a times. And I think every time I saw him, he said, "Tell me that story again." And so we just ended up having a good laugh, and yeah, a really good lad as well, you know. But they, you know, Gordon McQueen, the old Dave Watson, not the younger one that I played with.
Yes.
You know, they were monsters, you know, and they were built like trees, you know, and really forceful, because obviously the game was a little bit different then. You could do what you wanted. And so yeah, they were the kind of ones I remember. I remember getting felled by Terry Yorath, even though he was a midfield player. You know, it didn't matter where you played, you could kick anybody. And you know, so all these memories, certainly, you know, when I was starting off, you then kind of get a little bit more experienced, understand how to sort of deal with it a bit more, and you get a bit stronger and tougher yourself.
Yeah.
And it all settles down a little bit. But them early days were really, really great learning curve. And I couldn't have been at a better club at Ipswich to at least learn my trade with some superb players.
But that phrase of Tommy Smith, "Do that again, I'll break your back." He used that quite a lot, didn't he? Yeah.
By the way, he meant it, because at Birmingham I thought I had. You know, he waited for 2 years, you know, so it's not that he holds a grudge, but he certainly didn't forget me, you know. And you know, people have had, I'm sure people would have had a month off, you know, the state of his nose, but you know, I'm sure he didn't miss a game. Him, you know, he was built of iron. He was, and yeah, so he was my first kind of, wow, I think I've got to really toughen up here if I'm going to get bashed up. And you kind of get the hang of it, and you begin to be able to look after yourself a little bit. The more experience you get.
Let's indulge at Birmingham City. You've moved from Ipswich. You've gone to Birmingham. The players around you. We had a good team, didn't we? I don't know why Birmingham have been so unsuccessful. Perhaps it's the fact that we've had so many good players and then just not moved it on and kicked it on and bought them players that could just make the difference to get from mid-table to the top six and then further. But you must have loved your time there, playing with the likes of, over a period of time, Archie, Kevin Dillon, Big Frank, Tony Evans, Joe Gallagher, Alan Kirbishley. The list is endless, Colin Todd. We've had some great players, and it must have been a great time to play at Birmingham, and in particular under Jim Smith, my favourite Birmingham City manager, the Bald Eagle, was.
Oh, well, I mean, listen, you know, all the stuff you say is absolutely true. I kind of remember my time at Birmingham sort of having two teams. You know, the first team I came to, there was still a lot of the older players. You know, Gary Pendry was there. Obviously, Trevor was there. Joe Gallagher, Tony Want, Terry Hibbett. You know, great lads, Gary Emanuel, you know. So these were all like the first group of players, Gary Jones, Archie Styles. And then the younger ones were like Dylan was just in and around it at that stage. But they were all, Jimmy Calderwood was another one, you know. So we had great lads and full of experience. And then over a period of time, the second season, obviously for me, after having a really good first season with Trevor, the second season, within 2 or 3 games, I'd broken my left leg. And then during the season, I think Trevor got injured. And then during that year, I think he might have gone off to Forest. So the whole front line changed a little bit. And unfortunately, we got relegated. And sort of by that time, I'd felt a lonely figure, because I got back for a few games and then broke the other leg and my ankle. So I think I might have played 5 or 6 games that season that they got relegated. And Jim Smith you know, typical him, a great lad. And he said, look, I've got a friend of mine in South Africa. And I just come from one manager with Bobby Robson who enjoyed taking the lads away, you know, to wonderful places where you'd go and play a few games first, get a bit of pocket money, and you'd stay on and have a few days wherever you were. And he was fantastic for doing that, Robson. And then all of a sudden, when Jim Smith, you know, which he might have been the third manager that season, when he came along, you know, he was exactly the same. And he said, I've got a friend of mine in South Africa. Go and get yourself really fit through the summer period. He says, because you've had almost a year off. And I went and met his friend, a chap called Frank Lord, who managed a team out there in Cape Town. And, you know, what an experience for, you know, 21, 22-year-old boy, you know. And so I stayed out there for 3 or 4 months, or 3 months, I think it was, in Cape Town. And got my fitness back. The team was good. And it was just a fantastic experience thanks to him, you know. And it done me the world of good, because when I came back, you know, we were just signing Archie and Colin Todd. I think Frank came as well almost at the same time. And Alan Kirbishley, I'd known through the England youth setup, so we knew each other a little bit. And he came and stayed at my house for a while. And then the other younger ones were pushing through, like Mark Dennis and Pat Vanderhow. Dylan was more established. And, you know, we had a really, really good squad, you know, which was hopefully going to be enough to get us back into the first division as it was then.
Where did you stay in Cape Town? Because that is one of the most beautiful cities on earth, and that beach is really windy, it's really shaly. It really hurts you when you're walking across the beach there in Cape Town.
Oh no, we were to begin with, we were pretty central.
Yeah.
And I was sort of down, I think it was a Hilton that I stayed at
for
a while, right in the middle of Cape Town, right downtown Cape Town.
Yeah.
There was kind of an area called Precinct 5, which was dangerous, you know, with all the trouble and everything else. So you had to avoid that. And then after a little while, there was a few English boys who'd gone over there and were playing over there sort of full time. And I ended up thinking, I'm going to have a change. And, you know, he invited me to go and live with his family for a little while. And we were in a place, I think the place was called Rosemead.
Yeah.
And it was downtown. It was nice. And it was perfect. He had 2 young kids that, you know, were great, and would do the table mountain thing. As you say, that beach was sensational. The lads were great. And I just remember it was a great platform for me to come back and get stuck into the second division as it was then.
Before that time, I'm guessing you did have a tour to, I can't remember, Joe was telling me it was either Holland or Belgium, and Gary Jones and Kenny Burns was playing pool. Was you on that tour or not?
That probably was before me.
Yeah, you'd be thankful.
It probably was just before me, because I think they're old school, you know. And anyway, listen, you know, it was old school. I think old school, right school, wrong school, whatever it was. But it was, you know, they were good lads, and they all had one thing in common. When they had to train, they trained.
Yeah.
And there was no quarter given. And by the way, sometimes training was harder than the games, you know, because they all got stuck in. And it was a little bit different to where I'd come from, but it was another great learning curve, and just so many good lads. You know, I couldn't have picked a better club, you know, a second club to go to, and I had a lot of fun, and with a slightly different outlook on it all. You know, I'd sort of served my apprenticeship, if you like, at Ipswich, and now I was recognised as a senior player, and then you have to try and live up to that, which can sometimes be difficult. So, and sometimes it can be great and quite simple. You know, I think it was probably the first season I really loved, because, you know, it was a little bit awkward to start with. I think we'd been beaten off Manchester United and 1 or 2 other sides. And then all of a sudden we got going, and Trevor got going, and I think we scored a lot of goals. And I became very good friends with Trevor, you know, and him and his wife looked after me extremely well. And yeah, that first year was memorable for that. And then obviously, you know, it was quite effective on the pitch as well. And, you know, he had another terrific season, which obviously, you know, was the start of other clubs looking at him, which meant finally he went to Forest.
Yeah, and round about that time, there was an influx of foreign players after the '78 World Cup. Ipswich, your old club, had brought in Arnold Muren and Franz Tyson, Osvaldo Ardiles and Ricky Villa went to Tottenham. Alberto Tarantino arrived at Birmingham. What was it like playing with a World Cup winner, and what was Alberto like?
Oh, I really liked him. Yeah. I really liked him. Listen, I mean, as far as me trying to learn a different language, I think, you know, I'd be struggling even in them. Well, certainly in them days, you know. And for him to come over and learn English wasn't easy while you're still playing football. You know, you could see he could play. And I remember we'd gone pre-season training, and you know, we'd played a couple of games, you know, just to get going. And I remember, I think we might have been playing Plymouth, and he's come over to me as we're walking off at half time, and he's screaming, he's going, my fingers. And I'm looking at his fingers, and there's nothing wrong with them. And then he pointed down to his boots. So I said, you mean your toes, don't you? And he said, yes, my toes. So I thought he's going mad here, you know, his boots were a bit tight. But, you know, he was great, lad. It was just a little bit unfortunate that the one season that, you know, we weren't having a good time was the season he was there. I think he went back to River Plate and won all sorts of Champions Leagues and everything else. But, you know, he wanted to play a little bit, and we get caught with it from time to time, or he'd roll it into people that weren't expecting it. So I think it was quite a difficult one for him, but he was a really, really good lad. And, you know, the lads enjoyed him as well. It was good fun, and he got involved in everything. And it just probably, as we'd all agree, you know, the whole season hadn't gone as well as we'd hoped. And, you know, he was probably disappointed, you know.
We also must have had some of the greatest hairstyles of the late 70s in those days with Trevor. Alberto Tarantino. He had an absolute perfect head of hair, didn't he? We had a good-looking team, Keith. The girls loved you guys.
Well, I think he might have had an influence. He might have had an influence on me having a very, very silly perm, of course, when we had hair in them days. And I don't think I could have one now. But, I got you can imagine how much stick I got. But, yeah, so he had an influence, all right, don't worry about that. And there was, as you say, there was lots of hair in them days. And, yeah, and it was all good fun. But the lads could actually be quite brutal, you know, and they were, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we had a lot of fun with... So I can never really go over the top, you know, even when I was coaching, you know, with the modern day player, if they have a little bit of a funny haircut or funny colours, because, you know, we were doing it long, long before them. And so I have to hold my breath a little bit. But, yeah, you know, you do stuff, don't you, when you're young without thinking about it. And you look back and you think, oh, my God. But however, you know, it was all good fun, and certainly didn't stop us playing football. So, yeah, it was just part of the makeup, part of the fun that we all had. And but you know, we took it more serious than life itself, and I'm sure they do now. But no, there was times to have fun, and there was times to work, and not often did we get them confused.
We've got to talk about Kerbs and the Who. We've got to talk about Frank at Charlton. And we've got to talk about what happened before Chelsea with, again, Frank. So let's go Kerbs and the Who first.
Kerbs and the Who first. Okay, so we're playing Luton. We're playing Fulham the first game of the season. You know, it's red hot. And I'd heard through Jim Smith that Alan was in the house. So that was normal. I mean, I was the only one who didn't have a key for that house. And so, anyway, I've got back from South Africa, and Alan's there. And, you know, we got on great. And the first game of the season was coming up. We'd done the pre-season. Everything was good. And and he just casually said to me, he said, look, we're going to Wembley tonight. Win, lose or draw, we're going to Wembley. And I said, okay. I said, who are we seeing tonight? He said, well, my brother's got a band. And I went, who? And he said, yeah, that's him. And I thought, oh my God, so I'll never forget this. And I don't know whether that was the cause of the problem, but at half time, I'd scored, and I'm sure he'd scored. And I was coming off, and I think it was might have been 2-0 up. And I said, oh my God, I said, it's going to be good tonight. And, all of a sudden, the second half starts, and I think we get beat 3-2. And we hardly spoke a word in the car going down to London. But we got there, and we sort of said, look, we can worry about the football tomorrow. Let's just try and enjoy tonight. And we went sort of backstage, and of course, in those days, all the cast out of Quadrophenia, Ray Winston, Bill Daniels and all that, they'd all got in somehow. And, I was watching the Who from behind the stadium, looking back, I was seeing all their backs. Yeah. But it was just one of those memorable nights that before too long you're speechless, really. It was just absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, fortunately, that the first game of the season, it still panned out for us and we got up, and I've actually enjoyed this season. In the programme, they've kind of done a week by week or month by month journey of that season. And it was just nice to revisit that year because it was up and down and touch and go very, very often. But we got there in the end. But of course, it's Birmingham, so you're going to do it the hardest way possible, aren't you? And but to go and see the Who was fantastic. And then they came to Birmingham a couple of times as well, and got to see him again. And fantastic. It was one of those moments in your life that you don't forget too easily.
No, and I didn't forget the result. It was actually 3-0 at half-time. We were beating Fulham. And I think Gordon Davies scored a second-half hat-trick for Fulham, and they beat us 4-3, because we've always had a problem with Fulham. It started in 75 with John Mitchell. So we've always looked at Fulham. Right. Yeah. And but Frank at Charlton, I remember you telling me you had a situation when you hit the underside of the bar, and Frank was none too happy.
Well, it was a difficult, not a difficult time, but there was myself, might have been Tony Evans, Don Givens, Frank. So there was a number of players to choose from, and I think I remember, it was a tough start, and I think probably Frank was arriving, and it was a toss-up who was going to play with him and stuff like this. And I don't think I'd scored for a few games. Anyway, I think we played away at Luton, and I got a hat trick, and then so I get a chance to play with Frank, and I absolutely loved him as a bloke and loved him as a player, and we hit it off on and off the pitch. But I was saying that one time we were playing down at Charlton, I think that was a midweek game, and we'd gone one up. I think I'd scored, your memory goes, doesn't it? But I'll never forget, as we're coming off at half time, a bit of mud hitting me behind the ear, and I looked round and it was Frank, and I must have got through and hit the post or hit the crossbar, and he was telling me that I should have laid it to him. And I said, well, I was a little bit unlucky, I hit the crossbar. And he said, well, look, he says, you're getting plenty of goals. He said, I've lost a bit of confidence. And I looked at him and I said, you're Frank Worthington. What do you mean you've lost a bit of confidence? Everyone loves you. And he just laughed, and it just proved to me as a younger player, that if Frank Worthington loses a bit of confidence, anyone can lose a bit of confidence, and mind you, that must have been the only time, because he looked pretty confident. He looked pretty confident to me most of the time I was with him, over the next 2 or 3 years, and he was just a wonderful player, and that's why he caught me on the hop a little bit, because I think most of us younger players really worshipped him, and even he said that he needed a goal to get himself back, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it just shows you in sport, that everyone needs a hand from time to time, and I never forgot that, and I used to love to run round and try and help him as best I could, because he could do his thing, and it sort of matched up quite nicely with what I did. So we had a very, very good friendship on and off the pitch, and just more laughter that any human being really should have the right to have.
And you had quite a load of laughs in the Rum Runner as well with Frank, didn't you?
Yeah, that was interesting. He did enjoy the occasional night out at the right times, most of the time. But it does remind me it wasn't the Rum Runner, although we were in there a fair bit. He did sort of pop round once before Kerbishley and I had any food, and he told us that there was a restaurant opening in Solihull, and we'd been invited. And this was the night before we were playing Chelsea. And I thought, this is only going to work out. We'd never been out before a game ever. And I think he had a young lady with him, I think, And so the four of us have gone up there, and we were back by sort of 8:30, to be absolutely honest. But we had a really nice time, and it was all great. And we were a bit concerned if anyone had seen us, or we'd hardly ever been out before a game. But we hadn't had a drink, and we just had some nice food. And our pal favourite was opening the restaurant. And we went and beat Chelsea 5-1. And it just proved to me that you didn't have to be out every night before a game. But if you wanted to go to the pictures or a little bite to eat, it might have been a way of relaxing a little bit before a game. And then if you didn't want to go out, you didn't have to go out. But it just gave you the option, rather than, sort of religiously staying in before games and panicking and listening to Tony Butler, building the game up and up and up. So it was just something I always remember, that Frank came round. We had a great few hours, and then went and really ripped Chelsea apart, which was a great night for us all. Yeah.
I remember that game, so I went there with me younger brother and my dad. We left a bit earlier because it looked as though it was going to get a bit moody. My brother was probably only about 9 or 10 at the time.
Yeah.
I remember walking through the front door, and my dad would always moan about Birmingham City, and my mum would say, "Well, they're bloody rubbish again tonight." Then Sid, and he'd go, "No, they were great." I think she nearly fell over. It was the only time he ever praised Birmingham in all my life, like with me football and my dad. I think it was the only time he ever had a smile on his face.
Well, I can't remember. Who scored. I think Ainscough scored. I probably can't remember because I probably didn't. But I remember the game went particularly well.
Yeah.
And I do remember one game against Forest, that European Cup team. That was midweek as well. And Frank scored a couple of goals. Yes. Oh, 2 of the best goals ever. And one was with his right foot. And I remember walking back. I'm saying, I haven't seen that before. He says, I bring it out for special occasions. And it was he just said it like that, and I thought, oh, well, of course you do. And, he just wrapped one round his foot from about 25 yards past Shilton with his right foot. And I just said, wow. And he said, I know. He said, I'll bring it out for special occasions. As we're walking back, I thought, he ain't real, this geezer, and that's how he was, on and off the pitch. He was just great, no edge to him, would help anybody. And, was just a wonderful person to be around and a great player. So I consider myself really fortunate with Birmingham, because with Don Givens, with Don, I loved playing with him. Obviously Frank and Trevor, as sort of, even with the likes of Stevie Linux, there was loads of great lads there, and all competitive. And I think that just drove everybody on and on, really, So, happy times, but particularly with Frank, I was very, very fond of him and still am.
SRBMedia. You're listening to Keith Bertschin on The Legends of the 70s with the Gabbie Cabbie.
Did Frank ever tell you about the goal, or rather talk you through the goal that he scored for Bolton Wanderers against Ipswich?
Frank didn't, Frank didn't talk too much about, what he did or what he didn't do.
Yeah.
He was ordinarily be the last one in training.
Yeah.
But quite a bit of the time he'd be the last one out as well. He liked to practice. Same as Colin Todd sometimes would sort of come and give me a real grilling, and work So, some of the work I'd do with him, where the ball's being smashed up to you and he's coming through you like an absolute tank, it was all really trying to, make sure you stayed sharp and strong and improve. So, I remember Trevor as well, what a wonderful finisher he was.
Yeah.
And, he would stay out as well and practice, and it wasn't an issue. It wasn't even an effort. It was just something that these better players, in my opinion, have all really loved football much more than they loved being a footballer.
Yeah.
And they couldn't help themselves but do a little bit extra, for whatever reason, whether they thought they needed to do a little bit more or they didn't get enough out of the session. But, again, that was grooved into us quite early. And it would only be stuff that I'm doing sort of 10, 15 years later with younger players as I'm finishing, So, there's really, really good habits. And they had one thing in common. They all really liked playing football.
Yeah, I said that about Frank because I've interviewed Frank a number of times and been in his company a number of times, and I asked him whether great players of the past would be able to be great players today, and he said, "Of course they would, son." Kicked the stool back, started singing "It's Now or Never," and then talked me through his goal against Ipswich, and he said to Terry Butcher, "If you turn around there, son, and you were standing up there with all your fans, you'd have had a better look at that goal." And he said to me, "Son, if you ever see Ian Gillard, ask him about the goal I scored against QPR because it was better than that goal against Ipswich."
Well, I
Who's
imagine
just a legend.
I imagine his portfolio of goals could be fairly special. But as we all know, he was a fairly special boy, and I think, I know that there's all tradition in those days and England managers and so on and so forth. But I do remember not knowing Frank then, the likes of Frank, Tony Curry, Stan Bowles, Alan Hudson. They sort of weren't the best conformists. And I think at the time, West Germany were, one of the best teams in the world. And Günther Netzer was certainly one of the best midfield players in the world.
Absolutely.
And I think England won 4 or 5-1, and Hudson apparently was just off the planet, along with these other 2 or 3. But later I found out, that they didn't conform, i.e., didn't wear the proper dress code, this, that, and the other, and none of them really got a real good crack at it. But on that night, I think they all showed what they could do, and if West Germany weren't, the world's best, they were up there in the top 2 or 3, and England gave them a sorting, and Hudson apparently wrecked Günther Netzer. And I'm sure he did, because, that's the sort of kid he was. He was a wonderful, wonderful player and tough and strong. And Frank also was the size of a house, he just kept going up. And so he could sing Elvis songs for as long as he wanted, as far as I was concerned. And he loved it. And so, these players that I actually played with were terrific. And players I watched, the Stan Bowles, Rodney Marsh, Tony Curry, I sometimes feel that these players, when I was a younger player, I honestly believe these type players kind of actually felt they were honour bound or duty bound to impress not just their own fans, but the opposing fans as well. And more often than not, they probably did that, and so that's sort of the responsibility they took on themselves, that they wanted to make sure that people would remember them from both sets of supporters, and which I think was really, really great.
Absolutely, and that was 1975. It was the 15th of March when Uddy made his England debut. We beat England beat West Germany, the current world champions, 2-0. Borley and Uddy played central midfield, and Al says to me the only reason that Revy picked them both is he picked them to fail, but they were so fantastic. Uddy and Borley run the show. Uddy said before the game to Gillard and Whitworth were the fullbacks, and they were a bit nervous. So he says every time you get the ball, just give it either to Alan or give it to me, and we'll use it. And they were fantastic. Helmut Schön, the Germany manager, after the game said to the German press, "It's about time England found a world-class player," and in Alan Hudson they have done. Sadly, only played one more game again because Revie didn't like him. He didn't like Stan, Frank, TC, Rodney Marsh, and famously had the training session where he told probably 6 or 7 of the greatest players ever to play the game in this country that they weren't in his plans. I find it incredible.
Well, it's kind of, it's interesting over the years. I mean, listen, I have to say I have a fond spot for Don Revie as well, because he was the sort of current England manager when we were all coming through the youth and under 21 system. And he was as good as gold, but I think sometimes change can be too quick, and you can sometimes, not be ready for it. And I think probably that was the situation where, you've got these, they look probably more like rock stars and football players, but the one thing that sometimes you can forget, okay, they might not do one or two of the right things on and off the pitch, but, you actually got to watch what they do well. And they could all do a lot well. And I learned in my career, just as a player and a coach, that sometimes you have to watch what people do well as opposed to what they might not do so well, and work around that. And there were certainly players that were worth spending a bit of time on. Goodness gracious, they were absolutely fantastic and played for thousands of years, and didn't disappoint very often. You might say the same about, I don't know, Hovell, I suppose. Yeah. I'm not sure he found a complete place for himself, or Letitia and people like this. So it goes on through the eras. Yeah. But I think as time has gone by, you kind of have to widen your net, really, of what sort of players can succeed for you. And it's not always the ones that that everybody picked, that are just kind of not straight up and down, as would be a wrong terminology, but
players just, that they can trust.
But just maybe, and just sometimes you take a risk on someone that might be a little bit different, but can conjure up stuff that the normal player might not do. So I think it was a good learning point for all of us, and. No, but they certainly very, very rarely disappointed. I remember I was sweeping the dressing room at Ipswich when I was a youngster, and we were playing, I think it was Sheffield United, and Tony Curry came in and asked me where the pitch was. And so I said, well, do you want me to take you? He said, yeah, drop that broom. And, his shirt was undone down to his navel. Yeah. He had a hairdryer in his hand. And I'm thinking, Christ. I said, this geezer for real or what? And so I took him out. He says, you can come out with me and show me the pitch. So I've walked out with him. He's got his hairdryer. And then the fans, obviously, the Ipswich fans were giving him pelters, and he's just looked at them all. And he's put his arms up above his head with this hairdryer in one of them. And I thought, Christ, it's Jesus Christ, And in fairness, all these fans were starting to clap him, like even the Ipswich ones, and he came out, and I think Ipswich won, but he was probably the best player on the pitch on the day. He was absolutely fantastic, and that's the first time I crossed his path, and I saw him a few times after that, and he was. I really thought he was a good player as well, that perhaps could have done a little bit more for England, but as I say, all these players are wonderful, and I was fortunate enough to play, with the likes of Mick Shannon, Hudson, and they were tough. They were tough on the youngsters, because that's the way it was in those days. But it's the way they've been brought up, and I think we are all the better for it, And how are you going to argue with these ones that have been legends of the game? So they still commanded a lot of respect, and quite rightly so. And when I look back now, I enjoy the players that I played with, especially those ones that were really super, and nothing but very, very fond memories, of course. That's all we got now, of course.
Absolutely, and in Tony Curry, I would have had my England trio midfield of Hudson Curry and Alan Ball. You worked under Sir Alf Ramsey. Did you ever hear him swear?
I did once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've got to be careful, I suppose. I don't know how this works, but podcast, as you say. The only time I heard him swear was when we were at Liverpool, funnily enough, and I think we might have been 3-1 up, and I think we actually then started to pontificate a little bit and thought we were Liverpool, and started passing it rather than smashing it forward and turning them round. And all of a sudden they scored. They'd scored, I think it was 3-1, so I made it 3-2. And all of a sudden they looked like they had about 15 players on the pitch. And, we hung on basically to win 3-2, I think it was anyway.
Yes,
and we came off the pitch and we was all a bit shell-shocked, thinking that for 70 or 80 minutes of the game, we'd done really, really well. And then we got bashed up terribly. And I remember it's always worse in the dugout, isn't it? And Alf, for F's sake, lads, he said, you've nearly put me in the grave. And I think that's about as close as he got, but he was absolutely thrilled, of course, because, it was, not too many people got results there sort of against those teams, and we'd won. So he was thrilled, but that was the only time I'd heard him swear, good fella he was as well. So, it was all good stuff, and it seems a minute ago, but, it's 40 years ago, which is quite scary, really.
It is, and I think Sir Alf has echoed words that every Birmingham City supporter has said for generations. Say, you nearly put me in the grave. But I was reading Frank's book.
Well, that was basically it, really, yeah.
One on poor two. And Sir Alf, he went to elocution lessons. He was very, very well spoken, wasn't he? And when Frank turned up at the airport to fly off to some tour, I can't remember where it was. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who it was against, but it was more what Frank Worthington was wearing. Sir Alf was talking to these England people and the press that was there, turned round and uttered those words. What the hell's that? Frank had got green trousers. I think he got a Stetson. He got the cowboy gear, and I don't think anybody had ever seen any England player ever turn up in that regalia for an England tour before.
No.
And probably
Frank,
since.
I think everyone people that know him, people that don't know him, knew that he liked his gear. I mean, listen, he could make a bin liner look fairly stylish, let me tell you.
Absolutely.
But he did like his gear, and it was just part of his setup, and he was a terrific player, and I was all the better for knowing him, and really, really liked him, miss him terribly. Not miss him that we don't speak, not that he's been a bit poorly, obviously.
Yes, he has, sadly, yeah.
So
same as Stan,
but just kind of in their plum, these boys were really, really something.
Unluckiest ground, Keith. Have you got an unlucky ground that you played at?
Unlucky ground. Manchester City, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, probably. I think the two clubs I missed out scoring against, of that era was probably the two Manchester clubs.
Yeah.
And I think Manchester City. I remember twice. I remember the goalkeeper they had at the time became a really, really good friend of mine, Joe Corrigan. I kept getting through against him and couldn't score. And I didn't have much joy at Main Road. And Manchester United, I didn't score against them. I remember once at Birmingham, I hit a crossbar, and that was about as close as I got. Yeah. So as far as not scoring against anybody, they were the sort of two things I remember. But at Main Road, I had a few chances, one-on-one with the keeper, and he comes out and he looks like a bloody Hulk for me, So he completely covered the goal, which he came on loan when I was at Stoke, and we spent a lot of time together. and he continually reminded me that I couldn't beat him, so I had to stand that because he was absolutely right, But probably Main Road was a ground that, not that I didn't enjoy it, but didn't have much joy there, But everywhere else, done okay, really, as far as I can remember. So, yeah.
SRBMedia.
If you could replay one game from the 70s, what game would it be and why?
What, with me in it, or just any game?
Game with you in it.
Game with me in it. I'll probably have to say the Arsenal game, really. For all the obvious reasons. All my family grew up there. I kept going back there, kept going okay for me, and I think not because it was an unbelievably fantastic game, but I think it was 1-1 it finished.
Yeah,
but obviously for my own contribution and the combination I have with Trevor at the time, I was just probably saddened that for obvious reasons we didn't get more than one season to play together. But the Arsenal game, with that goal, I suppose, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yes.
And people like yourself will mention it. So I suppose that stands out for me in a particularly good season. You score a goal that wins goal of the season at a ground that you're a stone's throw from, and all your family are grown up around the ground. I imagine that's probably something that must be special to anybody, let alone me. So yeah, it was good. That was really a game that I'll probably never forget for the obvious reasons that I've just mentioned.
Absolutely. And let's go with the other one then. A game that you could replay that you didn't play in from the 70s. What iconic game would that be?
Game from the 70s that I couldn't play in.
What game from the 70s would you like to see rerun this Saturday night, for instance?
Well, selfishly, I suppose, Luton Away was quite a good game in our sort of promotional challenge, but I would have thought there was a number of games as well. The first season playing with Trevor and playing with all the other boys as well. It sounds like only Trevor was playing, which isn't quite true.
Yeah.
But that first year at Birmingham, I could pick any number of games that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And we nearly went one down against Wigan, I remember, in the cup, and we turned it around. But that was good fun in the end, and Trevor, Trevor was Trevor.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I remember a game at Middlesbrough where I think we won away from home.
Yeah.
And he scored one goal. He might have scored two, but he picked the ball up. He picked the ball up from his 18-yard box and then up in theirs. And I thought, wow, I hope a few people see this game, for what he's done. So sometimes even games that I remember for different reasons other than myself, But I've been fortunate to play with some fabulous players. He's one that, although I never played in the same team as him at club, we did play in the England youth team. I think it was under 18 or something like that. We played a couple of tournaments. I don't think we got beat. But Brian Robson, I loved him. I mean, it didn't surprise me at all that he went on to do what he did. He was just a great lad. Could play anywhere. Just wanted to play, and from start to finish, it was just like a blur watching him play. He covered the ground. He sought people out. He could pass it. He could do anything. As he was then. He was Captain Marvel. So that was a great experience playing with him and becoming friendly with him. And we're still friendly now.
And the player that Ron Atkinson says is the greatest player that he's had ever in his team, Brian Robson. Pop Robson.
Is that right?
Yeah, great player.
Well, he was really something. And again, he's another one that we spend a lot of time talking about. Given the career that he's had, when we bump into each other, we just tend to talk about our little trips away with our little England team. So it meant a lot to him as well, and we had a lot of fun. And we spend a lot of time when we do see each other talking about rubbish, really. But it's always good fun.
If you could have a one-to-one with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be, Keith?
Off the top of my head, I think it would be Bobby Robson, because I couldn't bring myself to go to his funeral, But I did write to him not that long ago before he died, just to really, I suppose, I heard he was poorly, and I wrote him a letter just thanking him for my life, basically, which, he played a big part in changing. And I think it was like, I don't know, November time. And I didn't hear anything probably until January. And then, a letter came through from him. I put some stuff in there, and he just sort of said, "Of course, I remember you, son, and I'm glad you've done so well with your football, and I'm glad you've also bumped into Steve, and you're doing a bit of coaching, as I was at that time." Yeah. And I just said, thanks for giving me a chance and believing in me, and I believe you're not as well at the moment as you'd like to be. And he just said back, he said, I've had a few problems, but he said, we're fighters, aren't we? And unfortunately, it was just one fight he couldn't win, and there was a lot of things I probably wanted to say to him, but I was pleased in a way that he'd received my letter, because he knew exactly how I felt. But he gave me my first start, and I had a lot of time for him, really. Yeah.
Favourite TV shows from the 70s era? We had some iconic cartoons and iconic cop shows as well, and Tiz was great in those days with Tarrant. And you went fishing with Chris, didn't you? And he caught a fish for you.
Yeah, well, he done me a favour. I was doing some sort of documentary, and one of the pastimes was like what you do on your day off, and we liked a bit of fishing. Me and Tony want, and we'd gone to this river where Tarrant had already left me a fish, and so just in case we weren't going to catch, which probably we weren't, before too long, we put this fish on, and like me rod is bent double, and I had to sort of say on TV, "Oh, I think I've got a bite," and me rod's nearly snapping. But he'd caught me a fish, and he probably still is, but he was a really good angler, a good lad as well. And so yeah, it was just part of the show, and so yeah, we all kind of mixed in quite well, with Jasper as well. He was getting involved with the football club, and on the board and everything else, and they all sort of knew one another. It was a great time, Birmingham. Yeah, so yeah, he'd done me the odd favour, and all the better for it. It was great times, and you wonder where they all went, really. But it all seems like in a flash. But no, it was over those 3 or 4 years. Had the best time I could probably have here in Birmingham.
And another big player in Birmingham in those days was the music scene, Jeff Lynne and ELO.
Yeah, I kind of got introduced to Jeff through Trevor. He was a good pal, and still is a good pal of his. And I remember one summer when I had a bit of time off, and he invited me to come to his house whenever I wanted. He was recording or doing stuff down in his basement, and he had a lake as well, so I used to fish in that and then go and listen to him record. And now it all seems ridiculous, really, but at the time, we'd play a bit of tennis and have a little bit of head tennis, and just do stuff like this for a week. It was like my week with Marilyn, that film, but I remember it, I'll remember it forever. Just couldn't believe, what a sound he could produce. And as I say, Trevor introduced me to him, and I fell head over heels with his music, and up until quite recently, I saw him play at the NEC not so long ago, and really, really, really great lad, and just a genius, really, without even trying.
Yeah, I think there are a number of, and I think the word genius is used too frequently, but I think when you put that in the same sentence with Jeff Lynne, it sits nicely. And I think Jeff Lynne was one of the great musicians of this area and the world. Any song or songs that remind you of your playing days, whether it be at Ipswich or Birmingham or generally of the 70s when you were out discovering yourself?
Well, at Birmingham, obviously, you have varied taste in music, but I did get engulfed with ELO and Mr. Blue Sky. It's a great song even now down there. They still play it, but all those albums, Out the Blue, things like this. There was 2 or 3 of the albums that I would continually play. I just really, really enjoyed it. I think Ipswich was quite different, really, and from the part of London I came from, it was mainly Tamla Motown, which was all the rage, until I met a pal of mine who used to pick me up from London, and when we'd had a weekend back in London and go back to Ipswich, he then, like on them big 8 tracks, in those days, the bloody cassette player was nearly as big as a car. But he introduced me to other stuff, because he enjoyed other stuff like James Taylor and Cat Stevens, Carly Simon, Carole King, which give me another different flavour to music, and it just extends your sort of the music that's out there, and so I can always tie in that sort of music to the clubs, but certainly with Birmingham, I did have obviously that brief encounter where I listened to a lot of Who stuff, but to be fair, Jeff's music for me, one of the greatest things, he got me a couple of tickets, I took a friend of mine, and we went to see him at Wembley, when they had the big spaceship come out from underneath the stand, or the floor, and that was probably one of the greatest nights of my life, and we went and met them afterwards and had something to eat with them. So it was heady days, and it all seemed so natural then, but the music thing was very close to footballers. You had a lot of time to kill from time to time, and they were just bringing out those little packs that you could put on your side and put the music on, and more often than not, it would be Jeff Lynne for me and the ELO,
And finally, Keith, sum up the 70 in the centre.
Oh, it was for me. I'm sure it was pressurised from time to time, and you tend to forget all that. I'm sure it was uncomfortable from time to time, and you forget all that. It was just not just with the players, but people outside the game who I've become friendly with. It was just the greatest time, from starting off at Ipswich, moving through to Birmingham, from sort of 73 to 81. I just had the time of my life, really, just not in every way possible, but learning the game and enjoying the football, meeting so many terrific players, and more importantly, learning from them all. Which was I was privileged to meet these players and play with them, and as I say, learn from them. Because there was a lot of good players, as there is today, and I think it was most important to not let it pass you by without taking everything you can that's good from all these players to try and help yourself.
Absolutely. Keith, are you on social media, or you have a website, or can people connect with you? And have you got a book out? And if you haven't, why not? And are you going to put one out? Because you've got some great stories, mate.
Well, I'm not a social media person, really.
Yeah.
So I don't do the Facebook or anything like that. I get continually ridiculed by my family, but I've added the memories, and maybe I'm being selfish by just keeping them to me. In our era, that's how we did it, and apart from the people that were there, you don't sort of tend to talk about it too much, and it would just. Sometimes you have to pinch yourself to say, did that really happen? But more often than not, it did.
It certainly did, sir. And you haven't just kept it to yourself on this podcast, because we're going to send it out to the world, and people can listen to the wonderful times that Keith Bertschin had. And it is Thursday, so it is a clap and a thank you Thursday. So on behalf of every football fan that watched you play, Keith, can I just say thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much for your time on this podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you for having me on the show, and I really enjoyed going down memory lane. It was interesting, I have to say that.
Thanks, Keith.
You're welcome, mate.
This has been an SRB Media production. Your host was the Gabbie Cabbie, produced and edited by Chris Browne. All inquiries, please email contact@srbmedia.co.uk. Yes, sir.